Okay, Rawiri Waititi.
Oh, wow. Get ready, strap in, whānau.
All right, I'm strapped in. I've got my popcorn.
Where's my seatbelt?
Mr. Speaker,
He's so good.
as I take to my feet, and as my people have taken to theirs, I stand here on behalf of my babies in the gallery and all of our mokopuna. Ko aku whakaro kei te ika huirua o te wā. As I stood at the edge of Te Rerenga Wairua at the beginning of our hikoi, ka tangi koto koto kia koro Bomb Gillies and my kaina Ricky Mitai. Both are the epitome of kotaitanga in life and death. The kotaitanga of the Māori battalion on the battlefield meant their survival and success. They knew that division would be fatal, a lesson to us all. Ricky Lee, in the short life, has embodied the voice of kotaitanga from the lens of kohanga reo generation. And in death, he has brought together all generations and all iwi as they mourn what should have been a future leader they had nurtured and moulded. They are the cost of kotaitanga, and they are the mana and tapu of our toitu te tiriti hikoi. The Treaty of Waitangi is superior to any person and any law ever created in this House. It is the constitutional document. By this House, a democracy is established here in Aotearoa. This Parliament means nothing in Aotearoa without the Treaty of Waitangi. The only reason this Parliament exists in Aotearoa is because our tipuna consented to it. The only people who can make changes in an agreement are the parties who signed it. The King of England, being ngā rangatira o ngā hapu o Aotearoa.
Best line.
Now tell me,
up.
David Seymour, which one of those are you? That are seen to be pulling the strings and running the country like the KKK with a swipe card to the beehive. Yes. And Luxon doesn't even care. There's a ghost in his chair. Everybody, every single one of the members sitting on that side of the House have enabled this bill to be introduced to the House. You are complicit in the harm and the division that this presents, and are complicit in the euthanizing of the Treaty of Waitangi. You have no right to touch something you have no mana over. The Treaty of Waitangi sits above you. You have no right to make VIP decisions from the cheap seats. How dare you threaten our mokopuna? The treaty was an arrangement to unify. This bill serves to divide. Te iwi Māori don't expect this House to liberate us. We must be our own liberation. We've been talking about Pākehā honouring the Treaty of Waitangi, expecting solutions to come from the very House that attacks us every single day. So the real question we now need to ask ourselves at Te iwi Māori is, when will we honour Te Treaty of Waitangi? Article 1 gave consent to Pākehā to govern over themselves. They've assumed governance over us. When will we begin to assume governance ourselves? The Party Māori is the only party committed to establishing our own whare rangatira. E aho! E aho! Our role as the Party Māori is to be a part, is not to be a part of this system, but to create our own. What is the pathway forward for us at Te iwi? Tino rangatira and self-governance is the ultimate goal. But there are steps we must take to get there first. We need to do what we need to do to get rid of this government. This must be a one-term government. How do we do that? E Te iwi Māori. We must all register on the Māori roll. E aho. Everybody must register on the Māori roll if you are Māori, if you have Māori whakapapa. That is the goal. In order to make this a one-term government, we need more Māori voices in this House. We need more Māori independent seats in this House. That is how we do it. Everybody on the Māori roll, if you are Māori, get on the Māori roll. Talk to your pakeke. Ko rātou ngā mea kai te raru. The rangatahi are migrating. They are registering on the Māori roll. That must be our goal. E taku iwi Māori, 35,000 people marched yesterday across that bridge. And they will arrive here in Parliament. And one message to you, David, is see you next Tuesday. Kia ora tata.
Yes! He's going to make David Seymour eat his hat. Look at the hat on the floor. He's going to make David Seymour eat it.
I know.
Brownlee had no idea what that means. It was hard to sit still and not launch into a haka tautoko right at that moment. I'm telling you, that was woo.
Yeah, I don't know how it stayed there right till the end.
Yeah, well, we were keeping our powder dry.
Let's just say that was a damn fine curtain raiser.
It sure was, man.
So now, does the curtains get closed again for Louise Upston?
Do we have to?
Honestly,
You sure?
it's getting painful.
Or Duncan Webb?
Duncan was awesome. Duncan
Okay.
was actually awesome. Do Duncan.
The Honourable Dr. Duncan Webb.
Kia ora, mana whakawā. This bill is a shameful return to some of the most offensive legislation this House has passed. When we look back and we think of the Māori Prisoners Act in the 1880s, suspending trial rights for Māori at Parihaka, the New Zealand Settlements Act 1863, confiscating land after Tainui Wars, the Tūhanga Suppression Act of 1907, banning traditional practices, and the Native Schools Act of 1867, banning the use of te reo. We look back now, we think, how could Parliament have been so wrong, so fundamentally at odds with the promises made in the treaty, so racist? Yet here we are. Christopher Luxon, you are presiding over the most racist piece of legislation in 100 years.
You could use the word piss, but not you. Just I'll take a liberal approach generally, but getting a little bit tired of the number of accusations
No, we're
fired
going
by
to take an aggressive approach, bro.
So you could word that a different way. No loss of time here.
I'll continue. This bill is a bill that's so obnoxious that 40 King's Council have spoken out against it. They point out that this coalition government's treaty principles bill seeks to redefine in law the meaning of the treaty by replacing existing treaty principles with new treaty principles which are said to reflect the 3 articles of the treaty. The problem is they don't. By imposing a contested definition of the 3 articles, the bill seeks to rewrite the treaty itself. But the treaty has endured, despite everything, a hastily drafted document that has versions in Māori and English that don't agree with each other. A treaty which this House has repeatedly ignored. A treaty that the courts once called a nullity. But its spirit has endured. Māori have never given up. They have been tenacious across generations. In the treaty, there is an underlying agreement and an intention between the Crown and Māori to work in partnership, to recognise their respective spheres of authority, and to protect, promote and preserve those things which are Māori. This bill seeks to do away with this by rewriting how the treaty works, by creating a new and deeply objectionable principles which deny the authority of Māori. What then is the promise of Tirananga Tiratanga in the treaty? In the words of those 42 distinguished lawyers, this new principle erases the Crown's Article 2 guarantee to Māori of Tirananga Tiratanga. It seeks to undermine the chieftainship and self-determination and their political authority. This is a damaging piece of legislation. This government, Christopher Luxon, is taking a wrecking ball to work that has been done by successive governments over the past 50 years since the Waitangi Tribunal was established. This bill would amount to the dictatorship of the majority. This Parliament can and has passed racist laws in the past, and Māori are still paying the price, and we all are still paying the price. So we've come a long way since those laws were passed, or so we thought. We've recognised that this House does not have an unfettered mandate to violate the rights of others. But this bill demonstrates that some people still think that because Parliament is sovereign, because the power exists, there's a mandate to expropriate, rewrite and revisit. They think their power is unfettered, unbridled and unconstrained. But it's not. As those 42 King's Council said, even if Parliament can legislate like this, it should not. Because it's not for the government of the day to retrospectively and unilaterally reinterpret constitutional treaties. That would offend the basic principles which underpin New Zealand's representative democracy. There are big constitutional questions that deserve debate, and the treaty is one of them, a contentious one. But it should be given a debate which is careful and conducted in good faith. This government has approached this debate in a way that's disrespectful at best and hateful at worst. Will a later Parliament look back at the conduct of Christopher Luxon presiding over this bill and put it alongside those parliaments which drove a wedge in our society, caused generations of harm? I think so. And now we go to a futile select committee process, one where they've said they're not going to vote for it, we're not going to vote for it. It's wasteful, it's divisive. That government should be ashamed.
Kia ora.
Yeah, he did really
You know,
well.
one thing I have noticed, reading up the history of our tipuna, is that over the course of our history, more bills were passed to justify the Crown seizing land rather than to protect Māori ownership. It's wild. And most of these bills were created between the 1860s and the 1920s. So it's like, you just keep that in mind when you're hearing David Seymour rattle on about the Treaty Principles Bill. He wants to ignore what the government did, the authoritarian actions. This is a man who claims to be libertarian. Authoritarian actions that the government took to seize land and give it to the settlers. The settlers didn't know. The descendants of the settlers today, the farmers and whatnot, they're scared. They're afraid because they can't accept the fact that the government lied to them and stole from Māori and fucked everyone over.
The very first law passed by our Parliament in 1856 was to make alcohol available to Parliament. And then all of the breaches of Te Tiriti follow from that.
Well, that's an interesting connection. I've never heard that.
Well, I do know, I think it's 1868 was the introduction of the Māori seats, and what was meant to be a temporary measure, because at the time the laws we copied from the UK was that you had to be male, you had to be over the age of 21, you had to own land in an individual title. That affected Māori who collectively owned land. But it was interesting how the Māori seats stayed throughout history and have overlaid our country with two electorates and everywhere ever since.
Here's an interesting observation. The original New Zealand Constitution Act of 1852 made provision for Māori governed regions to operate under their own jurisdiction. That they were never implemented, but that they were in the minds of people as part of the original coexistence commitment was interesting.
So would that be Tainui that operated autonomously in the Waikato?
I don't know whether it specified like the geographies in question, or whether it was a clause that made reference to the potential for tribal boundaries to be governed by the local tribes. You raising Tainui is a very important thing, though, which never gets airtime. The fact that there are significant parts of the country under tribal jurisdiction where the chiefs never ever signed, so there literally is no basis, and the Waikato is the biggest one. That no basis for the British and their descendants here, the constitutional descendants, to lay claim to those parts, except of course by the same means that usurpers and tyrants have ever claimed power, with weapons and lies and all the rest of it.
Yeah. Okay.
My adult life has been a journey of learning our own history that I wasn't taught at school.
All of us, bro.
Yep.
All of us.
Yeah.
We all got that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see what Scott Simpson's got to say.
The Honourable Scott Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, for the opportunity to participate in this debate, and in doing so I want to echo the words of my National Party colleagues who have already spoken. It's National's long-held position, Mr Speaker, that the referendum, or a referendum on the treaty, would be divisive. We therefore do not support this bill becoming law. We believe this bill is a simplistic approach to what is a very complex issue and will not deliver the equality of opportunity that National believes all New Zealanders deserve. Mr Speaker, over successive decades, New Zealand has grappled with how to deal with the treaty. And it's not realistic to suggest that almost 200 years of debate over what is an incredibly complex and challenging issue would be resolved by the passing of a single piece of legislation. It is too blunt and simplistic and risks stoking grievance and driving division. National, therefore, Mr Speaker, takes the more difficult but more practical and enduring approach to dealing with treaty and race issues. And that is to work together on these issues, case by case. Mr Speaker, successive national governments have worked well with Māori on treaty issues, and we have a proud track record of progressing treaty settlements to address historic wrongdoings. We know we won't always agree with each other on the best way forward, and that is to be expected, Mr Speaker,
Give it a rest.
on an issue as complex as this. For instance, Mr Speaker, National does not believe in co-governance of public services, and we don't agree that having a separate Māori health bureaucracy or a co-governance of local water assets is the way to achieve equality of opportunity. Just as we do not believe that this bill will help us to achieve the equality of opportunity all New Zealanders deserve. National was elected to rebuild the economy, to restore law and order, and deliver better public services. This bill does none of those things. Mr Speaker, the reality of MMP is that parties...
Constantly talking like that is not interjecting. It's being disorderly. There are two members particularly who've done it repeatedly throughout the afternoon, and I've been very, very tolerant. But they should remain silent for the next 2 minutes and 10 seconds. At least. Actually, a couple of days would be good, but... The Honourable Scott Simpson.
Hope springs eternal. Mr Speaker, the reality of MMP, as I was saying, is that parties are required to make compromises to form a government. That's the essence of MMP. And National has made a commitment to our coalition partner that we will support this bill to select committee. And we will honour that commitment today by voting as such.
Stop it. What did I just say about constantly talking? No, it wasn't them. I was looking directly at the member who is in my line of sight at the moment. No, please, enough.
As I was saying, Mr Speaker, we will honour that commitment today by voting as we have agreed in our coalition agreement. However, National is united in our view that this bill should not pass into law, and that is why we will vote against it at second reading. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Yeah, this is coming from the same party that says blame
Yeah.
Labour for everything, and yet they're making exactly the same mistake that Labour made in 2006 when they had that coalition with New Zealand First. It's like, oh, yeah, we'll blame them, but we'll make the same mistakes.
Yeah.
The one about the health, shutting down Te Waiora, which always, and no one really says it. So we've got this huge health disparity, and we're going to